Many masters speak about spiritual awakening and peace and bliss and happiness. But very few people talk about that liminal period between awakening and bliss that is unbearably painful. Now, I have covered this topic many times earlier, and what I see is people jumping onto abrupt conclusion. Oh, it's not a real awakening, it is depression, it is this, it is that. From what I've seen and from my own personal experience and people that I've spoken to, majority of us experience something called a dark night of the soul after spiritual awakening, not before. But let me first explain what do I mean by spiritual awakening. The phenomena that I call as awakening is not that the person awakens. It is a crack in the structure of the personality, the person, or what we call as me. And when that crack happens, there is a glimpse of wholeness, pure light, which in the moment feels amazingly blissful, very peaceful. It is so peaceful that we keep chasing it afterwards. But you see, when that crack happens, it affects the mind, the conditioned mind, because we have trained this mind from the very beginning. It got trained through, through schooling, through our environment, the place that we were born, and parents, relatives, friends, social circle, communities. They all shaped this entity or this personality that I call as me. So when there is a crack in this me, it is bound to be painful. And you see, this me is not just one concrete entity that is obviously visible. It is a much deeper entity, just like an iceberg. A very small part of it is seen on the surface, but a huge chunk of it is below the ocean. So when this crack happens, it happens through and through. It just doesn't happen on the surface level. It happens through the entire structure of the personality. So a lot of stuff from underneath now gets the space to come up to the conscious surface as this iceberg or the me mind is melting into wholeness. And that is a painful process for most people. Now, I have heard that there are very few who just instantly get this deep realization and the mind is totally gone. But I personally haven't come across anybody like that. But I do believe it because Ramana Maharishi would say that there are some. You just need to tell them that they are pure consciousness, and that's it. But for regular folks like you and me, when this structure is cracked, it is painful because there is this contradiction alive where one part of the mind chases the bliss of the wholeness, the glimpse, and the other part of the mind is still conditioned in the worldly ways, where it says, oh, be careful, keep sticking to the old ways, keep sticking to the job, keep sticking to this, to that, try to find more security in this. Don't let yourself lose, be guarded, be protective about yourself. It is still in the survival mode, still concerned with protection, still very much attached with the role, the worldly role. Whereas the other part is free. It experiences peace, bliss, happiness, vastness. Therefore, there is this tremendous contradiction, a fight, a cognitive dissonance, which is pulling in two different directions. So there is intense pain. And yes, depressive episodes are a part of this. But you see, even if you consider depression, it is not entirely a psychosomatic issue. It is also a spiritual issue. Therefore, I do advocate for therapy, even in such cases. But you see, I have been working with many people in this field, in psychotherapy, psychology, and at some point, even they admit that analysis has its limitation. Because at the root of it, the analysis is concerned with the individuality, which it considers as the fundamental basis. So, you see, here we are saying that the individuality is already cracked. And that is what awakening is. And that is just this very simple realization that everything in duality comes with the opposite. That means happiness comes attached with the unhappiness. And there is nothing that can break that link. Acceptance of happiness with the unhappiness is the pathway to wholeness, to deliverance, to true understanding of what the masters call as abiding bliss or abiding peace. Which does not mean that one can be selective in their emotions. It simply means total acceptance of every movement, every emotion that happens. Now, very few people talk about this, but if you see many masters, when they've had this experience or glimpse into wholeness, when their structure cracked, and they realize that they are not the limited mind-body entity that they think they are, but they are the vastness, they are the pure consciousness. It is not that that information was completely embodied and assimilated in their being instantly. They went through a rigorous process. They went through a period of isolation, sometimes meditating for years, staying in isolation for years. Even Ramana Maharishi was in isolation for many years. So that contemplation keeps on happening. So even if, let's say, one experiences depression, it is not just a part of psychological crisis. It is a spiritual crisis also on a very bigger scale, because the fundamental question still remains, who am I and why am I here? That is what depression is all about. The needing to be understood, wanting things a certain way, wanting to be perceived a certain way, all of this causes depression, which ultimately comes down to the fundamental question, who am I? And which has been the core inquiry that takes place after spiritual awakening. So spiritual awakening is the beginning of the process, not the ending. In fact, there is no true ending to this process, because after awakening, this structure, this entity, me, which is cracked, this crack begins to widen. And as it widens, one experiences this spaciousness, and one learns to remain in this presence or in this spaciousness as one goes about in their daily living, interacting with people, communicating with them. So the interactions, the communications, the relationships start becoming wholesome, because one is not operating from the conditioned entity, me, anymore. They are operating now from the presence. So there is compassion towards the other. There is capacity to listen. There is capacity to hold space. There is capacity to empathize. So it is a beautiful process, but it is marked by very turbulent highs and lows, sometimes intense highs, amazing ecstasy, and sometimes deep depressions, extreme lows. And the more you try to analyze this and try to figure out the problem analytically using the mind, the same mind which is riding on these waves, you find that the process is futile. Then it goes on and on and on. You see, in this journey of life, you have to swim through the ocean, through the turbulent waves, which are going to hit you, throw you here and there. But eventually, beyond the storm of the sea, the scary storm of the ocean of thoughts, feelings, and emotions, there is an island of peace, calm, harmony, and tranquility. That is why Buddha said, "Be an island unto yourself." It is not that you remain alone, isolated in that island. You become everything, the wholeness, the centeredness in that island. Because that island is not a personal island. It is not of the mind. It is of the presence. It is of the vastness. So one navigates this process. And the reason why it feels so unbearably painful is because we fight. We fight our thoughts. We fight our beliefs. Because that's what we have been doing. That's what we have been trained to do. We've been trained to use our mind, which is a brilliant tool, and it helps in worldly things. It helps with creative tasks. But the same mind, when it is in control of emotions, when it is not operating from the presence but from the separative entity me, that wants a particular outcome, which desires that things should happen a certain way, which longs for recognition, for the attention to be brought to itself, then there is pain. Because that me mind is resisting what is. It is in opposition. So you are swimming against the current of the river. And that is why you're not able to reach the island. To flow with the current, one simply has to surrender to the flow of the river, to the flow of life. Acceptance of whatever it brings. Do whatever you feel in a given moment to the best of your knowledge. Whatever action you think you should take in a given moment, take that. However, know that the results may not be what you expect. So the expectations, the needs, the wantings, the desires, they're all part of the separative me system, which is cracked. So there is frustration, there is irritation. But at the same time, this crack feels very blissful too. So this period of intense emotional highs and lows, it can be the most intense thing that you've ever felt. And that is why the me mind comes up and says it is unbearable. I cannot take it. It feels frustration, anger. It feels anxious, depressed. And it says, when is this going to get over? Or it will say, why did this happen in the first place? I'm sure you must have questioned yourself. You must have thought about it. Why did this have to happen? Why did I wake up? I was better off asleep. But you see, no matter how painful it is, this is the road that you will always take. Because truth, which you are, does not care about discomforts. It does not care about what you go through personally, because it knows that persona is a piece of fiction. This truth is wholeness. So the pull of that wholeness is very magnetic. No matter how much pain, no matter what relationships break apart, there is no stopping the seeker from seeking this wholeness after awakening. Only to come to this realization that there is no one who awakens. There is no one who's searching for anything. Whatever is here and now. So that's why sometimes Ramesh Balsekar would call this process a joke. Because the seeker doesn't even know what he is seeking, what he really wants. But that wanting, that desiring for lasting peace is necessary. That suffering that arises from it is also necessary to reach the island of peace and calm, which Ramesh called as deliverance. Now, it does not mean that the process ends. The process continues till the end of body. After that, I don't know. But till the end of body, it does continue. And mind receives fresh insights every now and then. Many times, even I feel, I see my own blind spots to a given situation. How I acted, how I reacted to a particular situation. The only thing is, there is no me to hold on to it, to create guilt or shame. Why did I? Am I a bad person for holding this thought? That analysis, that entity that does the analyzing is not there anymore. It's not strong anymore. And this continues to weaken. So, as a result, there is more peace. There is more space. There is more capacity to offer presence to others. It is a beautiful process. Yes, when the awakening happens and it is new, in that time it feels unbearably painful. Think of it like a cut in the body. When the wound is fresh, it feels unbearably painful. But slowly, over time, it starts healing. And it heals and it heals, and eventually, one feels relief and even forgets sometimes that there was a wound in the first place. It is somewhat like that. But you see, this wounding, this breaking of the persona is grace of God. What is the basis? Why it happens? I don't know. Ramesh would say that the source chooses to wake up some, and the same source keeps some asleep. All we can give is a concept of why that happens. Only the source knows why that happens. Ramesh would say that happens because that's what makes life what it is. It is to create the unbalance and then to create the balance again. Now our mind will say, but what is the purpose of that? Why would source do like that? But you see, from our limited mind, we cannot understand how the source functions, how the consciousness functions. All we can do is just accept that that is how it works. So if this crack has happened, If this awakening has happened, not to you, awakening does not happen to you. But if the awakening has happened, if this realization has come up, that all my structure, everything that I built from the very beginning, whatever I was struggling and striving for is completely useless. It is not giving me any purpose, any concrete meaning. Then that is a beginning of a beautiful process. It is going to be intense. It is going to be painful. At least for majority of us, it will be like that. But it allows us to look at what we carry inside. It allows us to meet all the monsters that we have created in our psyche, only to eventually reach at that place of peace, calm, and tranquility, that island, that is the real you, which is your most natural state. After that, life becomes spontaneous. Living becomes moment to moment, not recklessly. One still plans, one still operates with presence, but one lives totally in the moment, not in the past, and certainly not in an imaginary future. So there is less anxiety, there is less depression, there is more peace, there is more vastness. Till we are concerned with the process, till we are trying to accelerate the process, trying to get rid of the dark night, it becomes even more intense. Because again, it is the me mind that wants to do something about it, that wants to get rid of it, that does not want to feel. It wants to block the content that is arising in consciousness because it says, my preference is not this. But you see, spirituality is facing oneself. Spirituality is the courage to be with oneself because there is no other refuge. Nobody can help you. You are an island onto yourself. That place is within you, and only you have to discover that place. No one else will help you to discover it. People can point to it. Psychologists, therapists, spiritual teachers, philosophy teachers can point to it. But eventually, you are the one who has to gather courage to face what is happening inwardly and dive deep into that ocean, go through those turbulent waves to reach that island that is waiting for you.